What's going on, guys? Jay the Black here. Salute to everyone that's tuning in. We're going to talk about Jemele Hill. It's been a minute since I've talked about her. I think the last time I spoke about her was in regards to the Chad Wheeler situation that she did not want to address at all. The flaws. She only sees the flaws in, white men in regards to her getting opportunities like she got at Spotify. Well, apparently she is negotiating her exit from Spotify. She signed a deal to bring her own podcast network to Spotify, and it has failed. And we're going to talk about why it failed and how everybody should have seen this coming. This woman does not have any charisma. This woman is not someone that you just have to listen to. Nothing about her shows or content is entertaining. She basically got what she got off the back of what she did at ESPN, and also because Spotify wanted to increase their diversity investment, which is why Spotify is now trying to end this partnership they had with Jemele Hill. You know what Jemele Hill should have done? If Jemele Hill was actually a real one and she actually had talent and a work ethic, what she would have done was just simply did her podcast and did not look for sponsors, especially from Spotify, who I am sure when they signed her to this deal, they regretted it soon after, because they realized not only is she not charting very well as far as Spotify numbers, she may not have the work ethic or drive. She may not have the content that people care about, because she's one of these same black liberals who push racism in order to get a job. Y'all remember that CBS show? That CNN Plus show she had? That failed too. She did the show with Carrie Champion. That was the second show that she did with Carrie Champion that failed. Okay, they had a show on Vice that flopped. Then CNN Plus, for whatever reason, thought that these two women had market value and brought them into that failed app that they had, a failed streaming service, that they had. And now she is getting let out of her deal with Spotify. Now, I want people to understand something. Spotify is getting rid of her. Okay? This ain't a situation where she wanted to leave. They talk to her and say, listen, we don't know if we can continue this partnership. We're making some changes and we don't know if we continue this partnership. And because Jemele Hill probably didn't even want to do it anyway, right? I don't think she has the work ethic or drive to do these podcasts. She said, okay. So they are negotiating letting her out of her deal. Okay. This woman has no talent. She's a writer, but content wise, she's only good when she is produced, like she was on ESPN. But when she went full woke and political and this is racist and that is racist, she only did it to get a job, people. She only did it for the likes and the retweets. This woman has no talent. Okay, this woman does not care about black people as much as y'all think she does. She has this secret disdain for black men. And I truly believe that she is where she's at because of her race and gender. If she was not a black female in the public eye, she would not have been in the Spotify deal. Now we're going to get into this, but I also want to talk about Jemele Hill clarifying reports that she was fired. The heifer was fired. I mean, we're not going to do this. This heifer was fired. Well, I can't say fired, but she was, I believe they told her that they would like to end the partnership. And I think they're going to give her a nice, sizable walk away type parting of the ways. And I think that she's fine with it because I don't think she's good at making content. Right? So let's get into this. This is according to Awful Announcing. He says in June 2021, Spotify announced plans to build a podcast network centered on black women. See, Spotify, that's where you messed up. Stop trying to build things towards black women, because a lot of those black women have no talent. You're wasting money and time doing this. And to have that centered around Jemele Hill, that was another bad decision. The former ESPN personality and current contributing writer at the Atlantic, last November, Hill told former ESPN colleague Sarah Spain that her work developing the Unbothered network there was critical and was why she was working with that company, even while criticizing fellow Spotify host Joe Rogan, because she's one of these. She's a liberal feminist attack dog. Whenever these liberals need an attack dog, they call on women like Jemele Hill. But as per reports from Bloomberg and the Rap Friday, it now looks like Hill, her Unbothered with Jemele Hill podcast, and her network may be exiting Spotify. I mean, who was the audience? Like, who asked for this? Like, you were very bothered, okay? You were very bothered, Jemele. The whole Unbothered thing, no one cared. You know, if anybody was unbothered, it was the people who listened to podcasts on Spotify, because they weren't watching yours. They weren't listening to yours. You see, Unbothered host Jemele Hill in discussions to leave Spotify amid the company's recent changes in its podcasting business. You see, Spotify has Joe Rogan, even guys like a Joe Budden, for bringing more attention to Spotify podcasting. And Spotify thought that they could build and invest in other podcasts and it would work out, and that has not worked. You know, you don't get very many great podcasts on your platforms. You just don't, who are just going to be signed to you. One noticeable difference between those stories that the Bloomberg one presents, this is definitely happening, while the Rap one suggests negotiations are still in with Hill staying on. Here's the key part of the Bloomberg story on that front, because another prominent podcaster is leaving Spotify Technology SA as the company reverses many of its biggest investments in original audio and loses yet another black voice. Jemele Hill, an award-winning journalist and former sportscaster, is ending her relationship with the Swedish streaming service, which exclusively distributes the Jemele Hill is Unbothered podcast and her Unbothered network of shows. According to people familiar with the conversations, Hill and Spotify are negotiating terms of her separation, which will result in the end of her show and network. At least at Spotify, said the people who asked not to be identified because the negotiation is still ongoing. Spotify declined to comment. Here's what the Rap had to say. Journalist and former sportscaster Jemele Hill is negotiating terms of separation with Spotify, ending the Unbothered podcast and Unbothered network's time with the service. There have been discussions about that possibility, a Spotify spokesperson told the Rap when asked about Hill exiting the service, which was first reported by Bloomberg. A spokesperson for Hill's The Unbothered network didn't immediately respond to the Rap's request for comment. This may not be a completely decided yet, but the is ending and to leave language in Bloomberg story makes it seem like it will end with that separation. It's interesting to see that come after Spotify had talked up Hill so much in 2021. That was almost 2 years ago. They got to see what she could do, and she can't do it. After she sounded quite committed to what she was building last November, here's the key part of what she told Spain. Then on Spain, that's what she said. Podcasts. Okay, let's go here, because let me tell you, I don't think she has the work ethic and drive to build her own podcast network. I don't think she has it in her. I really don't. Mostly what I think about now with the business relationships that I have is inevitably I'm going to say something that's going to be ahead of my time. So when this happens, what's going to be your response? That determines a lot. This Spotify relationship, all I can tell people, is complicated. So basically what she's saying is that she felt stifled. No, Jemele, you're just not very good at what you do. I don't know Joe Rogan. I'm not here for Joe Rogan. He's terrible. He's irresponsibly using his platform all the time. The way Spotify operates is it's like the McDonald's Corporation. They just lend out franchises. Maybe it would be a different conversation if they had ever come to me and said, you know what, you can't say that, but they let Joe Rogan say whatever. That would be different, right? In their minds, they are just like, we're just the platform. Yes, we will clean up what we can, but other than that, it's out of our hands. Sounds like jealousy to me. It sounds like, listen, no one would care about Spotify as a podcast platform if it wasn't for Joe Rogan. Let's be clear about this. People knew Spotify as a music platform. Joe Rogan took it to the next level. He's the reason why you're there. He's the reason why you got the opportunity to get that Spotify deal. Care what nobody says. That's the truth. If there was no Joe Rogan at Spotify, you wouldn't have gotten that deal. But being the attack dog that you are, you'd hate somebody that you don't even know. You don't even know Joe Rogan. Going on Joe Rogan's show could have helped your platform, but because you're an attack dog and you cannot think for yourself, you're going to dislike somebody that you don't even know. That makes a whole lot of sense, Jemele. They have given me the same treatment. If that were different, I'd say we have a problem here, but we don't. On top of that, with me developing this podcast network for Black women, that's more important than Joe Rogan. It wouldn't have made any sense for me to end the relationship with Spotify, which would have been very costly, and wanted to make sure this podcast got off the ground. Was very important to me. I'm not going to walk away from that for somebody I don't know. Right. So how can you call somebody terrible when you don't know them, Jemele? You don't know Joe Rogan, but you're calling him terrible. You're just an attack. That's why your platform failed. And she said she was building a podcast platform for Black women. Since 2021, Jemele, what other Black women have you put on? Is Carrie Champion on your podcast network? You haven't done anything for Black women. You just get opportunities for yourself. But I don't see you helping no Black women. The only Black woman I see you helping is Carrie Champion. But y'all doing stuff together. That's your friend, right? Those comments to Spain came after Hill, seen above on the Dan Le Batard show last year's comments to the New York Times in February 2022. There, as part of the story on Rogan's deal with Spotify, initially reported as worth at least $100 million, then reported to actually be worth $200 million. Hill said, "What I would like to see is for them to hand $100 million to somebody who is Black." If they were to give a Black man that type of deal, you still be in your feelings. You would say, what about Black women? That's what she would say. And yes, that kicked up some fuss, but her conversation with Spain came 9 months later, and it sure didn't sound like she was preparing to leave Spotify then. And the company did announce a $100 million creator equity fund for creators from marginalized groups after that exchange. But as per Bloomberg, they spent less than 10% of that fund because it's all lip service. It's all this. Now I want to get to an update from Jemele Hill. Jemele Hill, she's saying that she didn't get fired. So let's get into it. It says update. Hill commented on this on Twitter saying a lot of what's being reported just isn't true. Her podcast hasn't been canceled, listing her upcoming guests and saying, "When I have something to say, I'll say it." You see here? The tweet here is truly comical. Next week's guest is Sabrina Elba. In the coming weeks, Blair Underwood, Cassie Lemons, J.R. Smith, Kenny Lattimore, and more. Let's see. When I have something to say, I'll say it. Well, Why? Listen, this wouldn't be news, Jemele, if it wasn't true. I believe she is negotiating her release. It's just not going to be right now. It's just like with Shannon Sharpe. Shannon Sharpe negotiated his release, and he's going to be there through the NBA Finals. I see the same thing happening with Jemele Hill. I see Jemele Hill staying on until after she has these next collection of shows in her deal. I think she's going to negotiate a release, but she's going to do a certain amount of shows until then, and then she's going to be out of there. But see, this is a little bit of damage control because she's being clowned on social media. Another failure. You done had 2 shows fail after you left ESPN. Your whole podcast platform is about to be leveled on Spotify. It ain't a situation where she's just signing a deal with somebody else. She's actively negotiating her release, which means she still basically is working with Spotify until there's a certain date to when she's gone. So she's not completely out of there, but she's negotiating her release to get out of there. So that can take weeks, that can take months, but at some point she's out of there. All right. So let me know what you think in the comment section. Let me know your thoughts. Like this video and share. Follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and I'll see y'all next one.